November 20, 1917, hundreds of British tanks move through Cambrai, France. Machine guns tear through infantry ranks while German artillery shells flip tanks and bury soldiers alive beneath them. By the end of the day, tens of thousands of fighters will be dead. But let's change one detail. Instead of the bulky Mark V tanks rolling through the war-torn landscape, something emerges that no one can understand. Main battle tank M1A2 Abrams, 70 tons of power, introduced to the battlefield nearly 80 years ahead of schedule. Gas turbine engines roar like jet planes, armor made of composites and depleted uranium, and a 200mm smoothbore cannon that can erase anything that stands in its way. What will happen when a modern tank, backed by nearly a century of military advancements, faces Germany from World War I? Will this change the course of history? Will it have any impact, or is it just one tank against the military might of an entire country? First, let's consider what we sent over 100 years ago to kill the ancestors of the Nazis. The M1 Abrams is equipped with a gas turbine engine producing 1,500 horsepower, similar to those typically installed on jet aircraft. This monster consumes rocket fuel, diesel, or even regular gasoline if necessary. It can reach speeds over 40 miles per hour, which is absurd compared to World War I tanks that could barely crawl faster than a running person. His armor is a classified blend of composites and depleted uranium, easily deflecting most modern anti-tank weapons, not to mention the pitiful shells of the 17th year. And here is his firepower. The main weapon is a smoothbore cannon M246 with a caliber of 200mm, firing projectiles made of depleted uranium or tungsten at hypersonic speeds. Against the Mark V tank, these projectiles will tear through armor like a hot knife through butter. Add to this a paired 7.62mm machine gun and a 50 caliber M2 Browning mounted on the roof. Thus, the Abrams becomes a mobile apocalypse. But Germany is not going to make this easy. In Cambrai, the Germans built deep defensive lines, trenches reinforced with concrete bunkers, barbed wire obstacles, and heavy machine guns ready to mow down the advancing infantry. Artillery batteries were positioned behind the line, ready to unleash hell on any target. Their infantry was armed with Mauser rifles and potato grenades, while field guns and howitzers provided devastating firepower. Against the British Mark V tank, these defensive positions were ruthless. But against the Abrams, things get more interesting. 6:20 in the morning. The first German machine gunners opened fire, slicing through the ranks of bullets aimed at the advancing British infantry. In this historical battle, entire platoons were wiped out in mere seconds. But today, a deafening crack echoes in the air as Abrams fires its first high-explosive shell. The concrete bunker collapses in an instant. Wooden beams and stone blocks soar into the sky. Machine gunners who once controlled the neutral ground vanish from a single strike. The tank machine shifts its target. The German outpost, hidden behind sandbags and barbed wire, disappears with the second shot. A thunderous sound erupts around the soldiers, and they are thrown into the air by the shockwave. The ground shakes as if from an earthquake. Soldiers, accustomed to the slow and clumsy roar of 6-pounder guns, have no idea of the raw brutality carried by a 220mm shell. At 6:45 in the morning, German officers hurry to deploy field artillery. The 45 caliber 96, the weapon that became the foundation of the German defense, was deadly against British tanks. The crews aim their guns at the Abrams and open fire. Shells scream across the field and strike the armor, but the impact doesn't matter. Designed to protect against modern projectiles, the Sabot, with double speed, the composite armor of the Abrams, deflects steel shrapnel from World War I like pebbles thrown at a battleship, and the tank doesn't even slow down. The Abrams responds. One shell with armor-piercing content shatters a German firing position, turning the gun and crew into a fireball. While British tanks took hours to break through artillery defensive positions, the Abrams does it in seconds. The infantry rushes forward behind the Abrams. In real combat, British troops often had to clear trenches manually, fighting room by room with grenades and bayonets. Now, the coaxial machine gun of the Abrams breaks the line, firing thousands of rounds per minute. The trenches are collapsing under continuous fire. German soldiers who once stood firm against tanks are now fleeing in panic. Horses bolt in terror, carts overturn, and officers shout for order that never comes. At 7:30 in the morning, the Abrams bursts into the heart of the German defense. This would usually take British forces almost the entire day. Now the ground shakes as its tracks tear through barbed wire, crush trench walls, and race straight through machine gun nests. Soldiers trapped under rubble discover they are pinned down as a tank passes overhead. German reinforcements will arrive at 8 in the morning. Squadrons of elite stormtroopers from the Kaiser's army rush to seal the breach. These people instilled fear throughout Europe, trained in infiltration tactics, armed with flamethrowers and grenades. Against British tanks, they were often decisive, but against the Abrams, things were not so simple. Shrapnel from grenades bounces off the armor, while flamethrowers spray harmless fire across the steel surface that withstands temperatures below 1,500 degrees Celsius. With each turn of the turret, another squad of stormtroopers vanishes in a whirlwind of machine gun fire. German commanders resort to the last measure. Heavy artillery, huge howitzers fire from behind the front lines. Shells the size of bathtubs arc through the sky and fall to the ground around an Abrams tank. One explodes just a few meters away, sending dirt and metal into the air. But the Abrams continues to move forward through the smoke. Its suspension absorbs the impact, and the armor remains strong. Where the Mark V would have been torn apart, the Abrams continues its path. By 9 in the morning, the British breakthrough in Commer had already surpassed all historical achievements. The trenches, for which thousands once died, were captured in less than 3 hours. German positions crumble under relentless artillery fire. Abrams uses his heavy machine gun mounted on the roof to deal with fleeing soldiers, cutting through entire companies. But we have a problem. Abrams is a top-class predator, but he is also insatiable. His gas turbine engine consumes fuel at a rate that was unimaginable in 1917. 60 gallons per hour, and the supply lasts only for 250 miles with modern logistics capabilities. There are no supply trucks, no JP-8 fuel, nor mechanics trained to service its engine. The British fuel their Mark V tanks with gasoline derived from coal. This fuel, with impurities, can destroy Abrams turbines in minutes. The tank continues to fight, but the fuel gauge is rapidly approaching zero. Each shot, every yard gained, every roar of the engine depletes his reserves. The officers notice the smoke beginning to dissipate. The engines emit mournful sounds, weakening their power. Abrams has breached another bunker, but the end is near. The fuel is almost gone, and ammunition is also running low. The battlefield is littered with burning strongholds and destroyed artillery. The German defense is crumbling. 11:30 in the morning. The engine stalls, the tracks slow down, and Abrams comes to a stop. An immobile steel fortress in the mud of France. British soldiers surround it like ants. Mechanics attempt to open its armor, discovering materials decades ahead of their time. They can fuel it, but not with aviation fuel. They cannot repair it. And, most importantly, they cannot reproduce the shells that just changed the course of the battle. It may work again, but without ammunition, it will only be an armored transport. For several hours in Comra, Abrams was unstoppable. He dominated the battlefield, saving thousands of British lives and forcing the remaining German soldiers to retreat in fear. It was a victory, but short-lived. He won the battle, but not the war. And although he tormented the Germans all morning, his influence ended as soon as the engine stopped. At the end of the day, World War I continued on a scale that Abrams could no longer significantly influence. Or, what do you think could have happened?